Hi. Thanks for coming. Hope you had a good lunch. So I will be talking about Gigaset today. This is a little bit loud. So just a brief introduction about myself for those of you who don't know me yet. My name is Kian. I'm the CEO and founder of AOE. I started the company in 99. I currently have one wife, 2 daughters, one electric car that I'm very excited about. And the past 4 years, almost 5 years, I've been head of marketing and head of fundraising for the Type of 3 associations. And I just recently announced that I'm retiring from these positions. But my successor is still within my team, so not too much should change in that regard. Also, I'm an open source advisor to the German government, and I just spent 6 months in San Francisco. We have an office there, so I moved there with my family and had a very interesting time there for half a year. Now I'm acclimatized again to the German weather and the German culture, and it was definitely a very good experience. Just very briefly about us. We'll keep this very short. I think most of you have seen us around. We've been focused on Type of 3 for quite a long time. We have 7 offices worldwide. In the last few years, we've pretty much invested a major amount of our energy into transforming from a classical organization to a true agile organization where decisions are no longer made from top to the bottom, but from the bottom to sideways. So there's no more hierarchy, and there are no more management decisions being made. This has been a major milestone in our development. We are now at 150 people globally. Just in Germany alone, we had 40 new people join our team this year, so we're in a constant growth spurt, which is at times very exhausting, of course. And today I'll be talking about Type of 3 and Magento. We're no longer focused on Type of 3 for quite a while exclusively. We are really focusing now on being a leading open source implementation company. We're not an agency. We're not an agency at all. We don't do creative. We don't do consulting or design in any significant portion, but we focus almost entirely on development. And in Germany, we're now the biggest PHP development company. And for those of you who don't know, we and the community together put a lot of focus on relaunching type3.org after so many failed attempts in the past 5 years, and actually managed to launch it, which was very exciting both for me and for the team, of course. In terms of what kind of projects we do, we are we have a broad focus, but as you can see, we are working a lot in tech. So, we're doing the global sites for Sony Entertainment Network, Kongstar as a mobile provider, the global sites for VMware, Cisco WebEx, Parallels, HP, WebOS. And so our focus, we have had a strong focus on tech companies for quite a while. Not because we chose to, but it just happened kind of naturally. And to give you a bit of an idea of how we try to approach these kind of global projects, just to give you a little bit of an insight of what we've been focusing on the past 6-7 years. We've been working exclusively with continuous deployment and continuous integration for the past 5 years now. So we haven't done any manual deployments in at least 4 years now. Everything is fully automated, from provisioning developer machines all the way to deploying onto the final environments. Also, we've put a major focus on test automation. In all of our projects, all of the custom code we develop, we aim at getting an 80% unit test coverage in all our code. So we have a very high focus on test coverage, and basically we try to minimize the amount of manual testing to an absolute minimum. Try to cover pretty much everything with functional tests, with unit tests, component tests, integration tests, etc. that then can be run automatically and replicated on each deployment. Just to give you like a rough idea, one of the biggest projects that we're working on a consistent basis with the 30-people team, on every deployment we have about 1,900 automated tests that run through. We boot up an entire server infrastructure in the Amazon cloud, just so that these tests can perform quickly enough, and then that is always run before the system is then deployed, because a simple mistake in the checkout can cost 10 million a day for this client. And of course, part of this whole agile organization is that we're working only with agile processes, from the very beginning of sales all the way down to continuous development and providing agile teams, and basically doing all of the support in the form of sprints. And for this project, just to give you a little bit of an indicator that I'm going to be talking about, you can see down here we had a development time of roughly 8 months with a Scrum team of 8 to 10 developers. This fluctuates sometimes depending on the needs and how quickly the client can provide the information, obviously, but this is kind of a typical project size that we get engaged in. So that's enough about us. Who here has a Gigaset phone? Okay, would have expected a bit more, but who has had a Gigaset phone in their life once at least? Okay, almost everyone. So Gigaset is a definitely struggling telecommunications provider. Some of you might have seen the news that they have not been able to innovate quickly enough. They have waited way too long to go into e-commerce, and they have waited way too long to really adopt the transition from home phone to mobile phone market, which has, as you all know, has advanced very rapidly in the last few years. And they are still the second biggest DECT phone manufacturer in the world, with 1.8 thousand employees. And they used to be owned by Siemens. Siemens, kind of knowing already that it was a dying business, sold them off to an investment fund a couple of years ago. And they have not had a very easy time since then. They are on a path of recovery, though, because they are embracing new technologies outside of what they have been doing in the past. They are bringing out, I don't know if some of you have seen it already, a new line of baby phone systems. They're bringing out some quite cool stuff for home automation, and they're actually also going into Android-based home phones that can be used both as a mobile phone and as a DECT phone. And last but not least, they are also going to be launching some tablet stuff soon. This is not 100% clear yet. It depends on who the new investor will be that comes in, but at the moment, this is the plan. What I like specifically about this use case is that it's something in a lot of projects that we are pitching at the moment in the e-commerce sector, we're losing against these guys. And it was very nice to actually have to migrate a project from Hybris to Magento for once, because Hybris has a pretty good reputation in the market, and not all of it is justified. As we could see, especially in this case, it was a very, very messy implementation, but also it just didn't suit their needs. In fact, they actually used Hybris as a CMS because they didn't have e-commerce functionality at the time. And Hybris is really poor at CMS. It's an e-commerce system. So they could virtually do nothing with it. They couldn't run landing pages. They couldn't do A/B testing. They couldn't change stuff on the homepage without coding, stuff like that. So it was pretty messy. Of course, they had issues with design and usability. They had very, very high operating costs. Just to give you an example, they paid about 50,000 euros to just get one landing page up and running in the system. And they had very faulty integration with their CRM solution, and all of the overall management was very complicated. On top of that, they had no e-commerce channel yet, although they had an e-commerce solution, but they just didn't feel that Hybris was the right solution anymore. The goals were that they currently have 58 localized websites, and they have a customer care and customer self-care functionality on the platform. They wanted to go into e-commerce finally and start selling their phones directly to consumers. Of course, the typical things that you find on goals lists, like state-of-the-art usability and all this kind of stuff. And search was also a very important topic for them, and I'll go into that a bit later. But one of the interesting things was that they came to us initially via Typo 3, which was a bit surprising to us because they had such a big focus on the e-commerce side. And we ended up using Typo 3 for a lot of it, but for the e-commerce portion, we ended up using Magento, and I'll show you how that works out exactly in the next part. So primarily, what we built is a SOA-based, service-oriented architecture that is set up in a way that we replaced Hybris as a CMS by Typo 3. We launched Magento as an e-commerce tool to handle the checkout. And on top of that, we implemented our own proprietary solution, Searchperience, which is a stack based on Apache Solr to do the cross-platform search integration. Interestingly enough, they kept Hybris as a PIM system. So they were happy with what Hybris could do for them as a PIM, Product Information Management System. And so data for the actual products are maintained in the Hybris PIM, are then synchronized into Magento and then enriched via Typo 3. So it's an interesting combination of content flow. On top of that, of course, there were integration needs with SAP, Salesforce, Rango. That's their CRM solution, which is based on Microsoft Dynamics. It's a solution they had custom built for themselves. And yeah, that's kind of like a rough overview of what kind of tools are in place there. Now, if we're looking at a product page, so if you go on the website, you have like a product configurator, a product finder, stuff like that. That's all stuff that's in Typo 3. And then once you actually end up on a product page, you can see the stuff that I've highlighted here. This stuff is actually rendered out fully by Magento. And this stuff is rendered by Typo 3. Yeah, so every single page is actually a combination of two platforms where the client doesn't actually notice, like the visitor to the website does not notice that he's dealing with two different technologies. So it's a very, very tight integration. It's not the typical integration, buy now, and then you end up on a page that's part of Magento. But pretty much everything except the checkout is a fully integrated look and feel of the two platforms. Now, what were the reasons for using Typo 3 for the use case was, of course, 58 languages. You know, as you all know, Typo 3 is very powerful in managing multilingual stuff. So that's definitely why Typo 3 was very important to be used here, to be able to abstract to all of the external systems. So all of the SOA layer is done based on flow, and it's important that you know this is all works very well with Typo 3 together. Of course, workspaces is an important aspect, and the possibility to manage assets for the web with the file abstraction layer file was also one of the things that they needed that Typo 3 could provide. And specifically for the client, you know, they had us implement several things such as, product offerings, press releases. They have their whole investor relations platform on Typo 3. All of the multi-site and multi-language handling tools, including import and export tools for translation vendors, the multi-level workflow management with workspaces, the external tools that had to be integrated. They also use our own functionality, the language visibility stuff, quite extensively that you might have used in the past. It's in the repository that gives them the ability to do language fallbacks across different countries very flexibly. And of course the Typo 3 Magento connector, where Typo 3 is the master system and it pulls information for content from a Magento information pool from the product information. So Typo 3 in this case is the master rendering engine. Yeah, and then there were like specific features like things like a phone browser that is just kind of like a stage. It's really just a UI kind of thing that makes it possible to select the phone that suits your needs most dominantly. Also, interestingly enough, they used to split the business phone section and the consumer phones quite strictly. They had basically completely separated sites, and this changed now with the much closer integration because they actually had major issues that people would come to Gigaset and actually not find the professional phone systems that they provide and so on. So now this is much closer integrated. Now on the Magento side, Magento is in charge of providing content for product pages, primarily the product information that Magento fetches from the PIM system. So as you saw in the screenshots, the information is actually not significant in terms of the amount of content, but this is information that they keep in the PIM. Of course, in an ideal world, we would have preferred to have all of the content in one place, but mainly due to their own restrictions of resources, it just wasn't possible to take it outside of the PIM and keep it all within Typo 3 or all within Magento. So they decided to use that path of keeping Hybris as a PIM system. Also, Magento is the master over the search. The search experience solution is integrated into that. And we have an optimized division of responsibilities between the two systems that I showed. And of course, there's a single sign-on in the front end so that the user does not notice. If I'm a backend user, I have a single sign-on between the two backend systems, so I don't need to log in into Magento and into Typo 3, but it's integrated with each other. Rango is their CRM tool, so Rango is also integrated with Magento. So all of the orders that run through Magento go into their CRM, from there go into the customer self-care. They have, they collect quite a bit of data on their customers to be able to do cross-selling and upselling at later stages, and newsletters and personalized stuff and so on. And so that was an important portion for them. So just to summarize it a little bit, in case I lost you a bit, we have Magento and Typo 3, where Magento is in a kind of master-slave configuration, where individual Magento content can be pushed to Typo 3, but then there are also cases where Magento is the master, especially in the checkout and in the My Account section and stuff like that. Magento stores information for reuse on the Typo 3 content pages. Typo 3 is in a pull situation to pull content from Magento when needed. And the product listing is in the backend in Typo 3 as a separate tree structure. So any product that they have exists in a tree structure in Typo 3 to create all of this customized content that you saw underneath the product. So they can use all of the regular Typo 3 flexible content elements, Templar Voila features, extensions, whatever they want on each single product page. And then the Magento Rango connector is basically in charge of synchronizing all the information out of Magento. So typo 3 is simply a consuming system. It's not a pushing system. It does not push information out. Only Magento does that. And so the integration with the backend systems via this SOA layer happens primarily from Magento. Yeah, so this is just to give you an idea of, it's not an amazing screenshot, just gives you an idea of how you can, inside of Magento, you can actually see the page tree from typo 3. So you can define what kind of content from Magento you want to actually have show up in typo 3. This is just to show it with a little diagram again, what I just explained in case it wasn't clear enough. One very important component, of course, for performance reasons is the varnish layer in the middle that tries to cache as much as possible from both systems so that the amount of hits to the actual dynamic systems and the database is reduced significantly. And then a key component is the Searchperience solution. Searchperience is based on Apache Solr, and so it's a search that's currently the only one out there that is capable of indexing both via a crawler and ingesting structured data. If you know a little bit about commerce search, you probably heard of things like FactFinder or FredHopper or Endeca or other solutions like that, Exorbyte. But all of these solutions can only ingest structured XML data, which is fine because you need that to do faceting and filtering across your data. Because otherwise, if the data is not structured, how do you want to generate facets and filters on your data? But Searchperience can combine both. So we can crawl, and the crawler semantically detects what are the facets and the filters of the content that it's crawling. And so if we don't have XML that has all the data, like in this case, we can enrich the data we get via XML by additionally crawling the information on the actual website through a web-based crawler. So if you want to think about it, it's a combination of the Google Enterprise search appliance with the Google Commerce Search. So again, both of these technologies can only do one side of the story. There's no technology apart from Searchperience that can combine them two. And this was important for them because from the XML, we actually only get what's in the PIM system. And as you saw, that's very little. It's really just the basic information about the products. So all of the additional information is actually fetched from crawling the sites with all of the content. Of course, typo 3 is also directly integrated, so typo 3 can push content directly into the index. But if you're using additional third-party tools, whether it's a forum or a blogging system or whatever, then you can index that content additionally. And then what we can do with this is it basically gives them all the features they need to actually use the search as a selling tool, so they can do, on top of the stuff that you kind of expect, like filters and facets, and did you mean, and autocorrect, and live search, and this kind of stuff. They can also, do kind of, it has its own AdWords engine, so you can say, when someone looks for this term, please show a banner here, or if someone looks for this, please boost this product to the very top of the search results. And you can also create very complex business rules, like you can say, if someone went to the consumer page, but then changed to the professional page, and then looked at products that cost between 100 and 200 euros, and then they search for a phone, please boost this phone by 200%. So they have a lot of control over how they can personalize the search behavior of every user on their site. And then this is, again, just some standard typo 3 stuff, nothing very exciting. I'm sure all of you have built stuff like that. some configurator extensions that help people pick the right phone, compare them based on certain parameters that people might need to find the right phone, and all of this with a neat interface that helps people pick the right selection. So that's it. Try to keep it short. Do you have any questions? Anything specific? Maybe I rushed a little bit over some of the technical things, but since it's a business talk, I didn't want to go too much into the details, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about specific portions of the integration. No. Just to repeat the question for the camera, if there's any versioning for the investor data, this typical thing with versioning is something that is usually, of course, a regulatory thing, not only for investor pages, but I mean, we do a lot of stuff for the telecom, and they constantly get sued over what they have written in their terms and conditions and how often they change it. So they always need to be able to prove what the terms and conditions were on a certain day, 5 years ago or 2 years ago. And this is something that, in our opinion, is something that just there's no point to keep that in a CMS. It makes the CMS slow. It keeps it from being quick to backup and quick to deploy, because you're just amassing a lot of data that you will need once every 2 years, once every 5 years, or whatever, depending on how often you get sued, of course. But this is something that we typically solve with a backup and restore infrastructure. So we just simply back up every deployment of the system or every change of the system and keep versions of it. And then if the client needs a certain version, we can pull that out of a backup repository and push it onto a certain server so they can see it and show it to the lawyers or whatever. There are I've seen some CMS technologies like Sitecore, for example, that have some very fancy looking features with like time dials and so on, and you can turn the time dial back 5 years and then see what the page looked like 5 years ago. But if you think about what kind of data you need to store to achieve something like that, it's just going to make your CMS so slow that it's really not the right system to keep this in. Yeah, incrementally. Yeah. I mean, in some cases, it's really like, for example, with someone like the telecom, it's only specific pages that can actually be affected for that. And then, of course, these backups are very small. You don't want to keep backups of all your product images for 5 years and all the iterations you had and so on. You can also just use the Wayback Machine. So the standard solar search is basically solar is designed to create an index, and you have tons of ways of manipulating how that index is created. But it's all done on a flat file basis or a command line basis. So there's no real interface for it. So whenever someone builds like a type of 3 module, solar module, you need to abstract whatever configuration you want to be able to do into interfaces in that extension. Now, Searchperience takes it like a step further and basically comes with an entire backend of like dozens of features that make you able to completely manipulate the search behavior in any way you want. Like you can do, as I said, you can do rule-based, you can create rules in the backend, click them together basically. You can search individual pages or products and give it manual boost factors. You can take stuff out of the index with one click. You can highlight stuff in the search results with one click. You can create something, you can use something we call widgets, where you basically implement JavaScript widgets anywhere on the page, and what they do is they do requests against Solar. So for example, a lot of Magento stores want to show their most sold products. If you do this with Magento, it's a major performance problem, because basically this widget in Magento is dynamically generated way too often, checking what's the most sold product right now. In Solar, we can do these requests in milliseconds and still have a fully dynamic page. So a lot of the times when we do large Magento sites, we basically deactivate anything that's dynamic in Magento, because it's just going to kill you if you have a lot of content, if you have a lot of traffic, and then do all of the personalization and dynamic content with Searchperience, because it's just so much faster. Like, it's really unbelievable how much faster it is. Like one of the case studies that I talked about in the past is Angry Birds, for example. And Angry Birds has at times more than 5,000 concurrent users. And basically the way that it's set up is that we can cache 98.6% of all of the content. And all of that traffic that hits the 98.6% can be handled by just 2 varnish instances, because it's just cached content. And then for the 1.4% that's remaining, we need 25 servers to manage the traffic on that. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much like performance killing dynamic traffic can be. So, and this is something where Solar is extremely fast. Like even when you have millions of records in your index, you don't even notice the performance impact. It's like in the 0.00 milliseconds kind of area. Because it's compiled and cached Java and not dynamic PHP that needs to be executed every time, and there are no database calls that need to be done in that case. Did that answer your question, or? Yeah? Okay.
Speaking of dynamic content, you also mentioned varnish.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, varnish and dynamic data is something
Correct.
which is a little bit complicated to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's exactly what we do. We try to cache anything that we can cache, and then everything we cannot cache, we put into AJAX requests. So they are typically, if you are in a store, for example, just a very simple example, if you've put something in your basket, and then you keep surfing on the web, a standard Magento system or any other e-commerce system will have to render every page from then on dynamically, because it has to show dynamically what you have in your basket. That's a complete waste of performance. So there are different ways of approaching this. One is you write into a cookie that you have one item in your basket, and then render the page statically and pull that information that there's one page in the basket via the cookie. Then you don't even need a real AJAX call. Or if it's more dynamic information, such as I mentioned, people that bought this product or people that bought your product also bought this product, then you do that via an AJAX call. That doesn't keep you from varnish caching all of the rest of the content on your page. So in the end, you really, it's not performance optimization of Magento or Typo 3, it's actually avoiding using Magento or Typo 3 for as much as you can. And that's a very typical way of doing it nowadays, because any of these enterprise systems have these challenges that there's just way too much stuff that the system needs to do to render out a page dynamically that is just not worth it. There are some, sorry? It depends. I mean, did you see the talk from Vitaly yesterday morning? He talked about performance stuff there. There are different ways you can do it. For example, what he mentioned in his talk was that what Hugo Boss does is that it only loads the feedback forms via AJAX once your mouse moves 200 pixels close to the feedback button. You know, you can do things like that. You can do things like, you know, like stuff that definitely needs to be there, like the basket. You load that on page load via AJAX. But then other things you might only want to load once you started scrolling or something like that. So I don't think there's like one answer to it. I think like with every project, you look at the design and then and at the requirements of functionality, and then you can pick it. There are also in Varnish, Timek, what's the name for this again? These server-side includes that Varnish has. Yeah, what? SSI or something, or what was it called? ESI, that's right, ESI. Yeah, that's another approach, but it's not very tested yet, but there is the possibility to use ESI in Varnish, so Varnish itself actually can basically inject dynamic content into your cached pages. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if, at least last year when I saw some people that have been experimenting with it, it wasn't very proven yet to work, but that might also be an option. Of course, this kind of stuff only becomes relevant when you're really dealing with a lot of traffic. I mean, actually Gigaset does not deal with massive amounts of traffic. They have a relatively small server infrastructure, but of course, it's always easier to put a Varnish in place and save them 3 or 4 servers that they would need if you didn't put it there. But there are examples like the biggest site that we have under management at the moment has up to 5 million unique visitors per day. So it's about 90 million per month, and there it's basically, you know, if you wouldn't use methods like that, it would be impossible to handle this with a normal hosting budget. Because I mean, we did the math. If we weren't doing more than 90% of the content cached, and it would require like 50 plus servers to run it, and like this, it runs on 6 servers. Who here has had experience with integrating Typo 3 and Magento? And what was the experience like? Different? Yeah, okay. Similar story. We tried several things over the last 3-4 years as well. And even now, we don't do it the same every time. We always make the decision first with the client which system is required more. Like what system brings more features to the table, and then that decides who is the master primarily. And if you need a master or not, if you can keep them separate from each other because you're really just doing some cross-selling, or if you need them to really integrate closely. There's definitely different ways of doing it. What was your experience?
I just had a talk in a space this morning.
Yeah.
In our case, we don't have a master. They are the same method.
Mm-hmm.
But we provided some integrations in the backend that they don't know which content. So that we implemented with some modules to get products, to get the card, the wishes for Magento. In Magento, we implemented a module to get template content, and that to be shown in the Magento page. For example, in a product details page, there is a page for the Magento title page.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And are you using the same templating for both systems?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So in this case, there is a master template, that is the type 3 one.
Okay.
In Magento, we just customize the parts of the template that are provided by Magento. So in the Magento page, there is a template that comes from type 3, and we put content from the
Okay. Okay. Yeah, our experience has been that Typo 3 is so much more flexible with templating that it makes sense to do the templating in the way that Magento wants it, in terms of how you cut the markup and everything, and then you just use Templar Voila and map it. So then really the template is only done once. You're laughing. What did you do? Yeah. You're laughing because you agree or you disagree? Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know, but we have been developing Temporal Lab for the last 5 years. So the reason why it's no longer officially supported is that there are a lot of people in the community that don't seem to need it, and that caused a lot of frustrating discussions between Tulip, the core maintainer of it, and other core developers. So he just decided, to no longer bother with that, but we just keep maintaining it internally. We still think that it's way more powerful than anything else existing in Typo 3, but of course it has its kinks, but yeah, I don't think there's another solution yet that can give the same flexibility. Me personally not, but I'm sure the guys have been watching the stuff that has been happening also. I forgot the name now, that other project that has been initiated this year, I think. Yeah, Grid Elements, that's right. But there are a lot of things that are just not solved in the same way yet, especially when it comes to very large multilingual sites. The experience that we have with Temporal Voila is actually very good on doing language overlays and fallbacks and stuff like that. The flexibility that you have with it is pretty significant. All done? All right, thank you very much.